Today is 19-year-old Jesse Ryan's first day in prison. He's been sentenced to 6 months, but if he's lucky, he might be out in 3. There aren't many like him here. He's surrounded by aggressive brutes. At least he's sharing a cell with another young guy, who cowers in the corner upon seeing his new cellmate. Jesse frequently locks eyes with the bearded prison authority, Brendan Lynch. One day, Jesse's cellmate is dragged off to a secluded spot by 3 sinister inmates. As Jesse walks by Brendan playing chess, he decides to show off by checkmating him in 3 moves. Jesse knows Brendan's name and background from reading about him. Shortly after, Jesse's cellmate rushes past, pulling up his pants. That night, the poor guy starts sharpening a toothbrush. In the cafeteria, expecting another attack, Jesse realizes the kid stands no chance, so he provokes a fight with him instead. The seasoned inmates appreciate his cunning. Jesse gets thrown into solitary confinement under the scorching sun. When he's released, Brendan advises him to stay out of others' business, hinting at the trio who had beaten his cellmate in the yard. The next morning, Jesse wakes to strange noises. His cellmate is bleeding profusely from the throat. He's committed suicide, unable to endure the torment any longer. This is a real tragedy for Jesse because Brendan has implied that he will be their new plaything. Now, it's Jesse's turn to make a shank. Jesse cautiously made his way to the showers, aware of his surroundings. 3 inmates followed him, but Brendan and his crew blocked their path, ordering them to back off. Brendan convinces Jesse that a toothbrush won't protect him, but he can. In exchange, Jesse will help Brendan escape later. Brendan faces 20 years, and helping Jesse could extend that to 25. Jesse has some time to think, but in reality, he has no choice. At the first opportunity, the attackers drag Jesse into the restroom, pin him to the floor, and pull down his pants. Once again, Brendan and his men come to Jesse's rescue. They beat up the trio, and throw the ringleader off the 2nd floor, killing him. 6 months later, Jesse is released. He immediately contacts the crime boss Sam, with whom Brendan played correspondence chess. Jesse is given a suitcase and housed in a luxurious seaside apartment. Inside the suitcase are several passports for Brendan, clothes, and a gun. A woman named Tasha visits Jesse, delivering a phone and stacks of cash from Sam. Jesse is then sent to meet a patched-up guy living in a trailer. In his garage, there's an arsenal, assault rifles, a machine gun, and even an RPG. Private Wilson allows Jesse to test the weapons at a local range and sells him the necessary guns. One day, Jesse's phone rang. Sam informed him that tomorrow they would need to take a helicopter flight. Jesse paid for a sightseeing flight, and once airborne, he aimed an MP5 at the pilot, ordering him to turn off the radio and follow specific coordinates. Meanwhile, in prison, Brendan retrieved a shank and handed it to Sterlo. They took a guard hostage and forced the security to open the door to the yard. The escapees now needed to wait for the helicopter, and Jesse didn't let them down. When the guards ran into the yard, Jesse opened fire, allowing Brendan to reach the helicopter, covering Sterlo and Merv. All 3 managed to escape. On a vacant lot, Jesse had previously stashed a recently purchased car. They tied up the pilot and left him by the helicopter. The radio broadcast reported that 2 bank robbers and a rapist, who attacked a schoolgirl, had escaped from prison. Brendan and Sterlo were unaware of this. Thus, Brendan pulled Merv from the car and brutally beat him. Merv was on his own now. He shouldn't have lied. People like him aren't trusted. In the suitcase were Brendan's belongings. He shaved and, along with his accomplices, went to see Sam. Sam wants the robber to get to work immediately and steal gold bars directly from a smelting facility. At the party, Jesse couldn't take his eyes off Tasha, trying to impress her. Suddenly, Sam's nephew Josh approached, sparking a conflict that ended with Josh pushing Jesse into the pool. It turned out Jesse couldn't swim, and Tasha had to rescue him. After the party, she took her new acquaintance for a drive and dropped him off at a restaurant. She convinced him that she wasn't involved with the boss. Sam had found her through an ad and promised an Australian passport after some work, but she was deceived. She couldn't escape. The last girl who tried was burned. The next morning, Jesse faced a serious talk. If anything romantic had developed with the girl, they would both be shark food by now. If Jesse continued to let his desires lead him, he would be out of the team. Brendan demanded they find new accommodations from which escape would be easier if the cops showed up. Along with Jesse, they arrived at a quarry where the robbery would take place. Jesse was tasked with crawling through the ventilation to a specific room, holding the workers at gunpoint, and opening the main entrance for the others, ensuring no one hit the panic button. They now needed a driver. The criminals headed to a racetrack where Brendan reunited with an old acquaintance, Chris. With the team assembled, Brendan laid out the plan and assigned roles. Jesse and Josh clashed again and had to be separated. In the club where Tasha worked, patrons began harassing her. Jesse defended Tasha from the club patrons. Despite the risks, they agreed to meet after work at the beach. Tasha entered the water topless, luring her young friend into the sea to teach him how to swim. Jesse shared a harrowing childhood memory of his alcoholic father pushing him off a boat, nearly drowning him. Moved by his story, Tasha decided to be intimate with him right there in the water. The next morning, she gifted Jesse a lucky amulet. He planned to take his share of the heist's loot and run away with Tasha after the job. Jesse almost arrived late. The robbers, disguised as workers, showed their papers and passes to infiltrate the quarry site. Now, everything depended on Jesse. As he crawled through the ventilation, Brendan disabled his security camera. Jesse paused to remove a grate over the room where gold was being smelted, waiting for the workday to begin. Sam anticipated that the newcomer would suggest to Tasha that they run away together. Meanwhile, she lied to her boss, claiming she hadn't been intimate with Jesse, knowing such a revelation would be dangerously risky. Daybreak arrived. Brendan briefed his team, instructing them to shoot workers in the legs should they attempt to act heroically. The robbers infiltrated the surveillance station and knocked out the guard. Brendan collected all the recording discs and pulled guns from his bag. It was then Jesse's turn. He donned a monkey mask and jumped down. He intimidated the workers and forced them to open the door. The robbers entered and compelled a few workers to start melting gold. Josh was supposed to be near the furnace, but was left to watch the hostages. Nervous, he shot a man in the leg. Brendan broke his nose with the butt of his gun and applied a tourniquet to the wounded man. The police arrived. All gold bars were bagged. The robbers surrounded themselves with a crowd of workers and headed outside. Brendan opened fire on the police cars. Chris sped onto the scene, and the bandits jumped into the car. As they drove away, Brendan continued shooting. The police returned fire, managing to wound Sterlo in the stomach. A chase ensued. Brendan fired at the police car until he ran out of bullets. Bleeding and crying, Sterlo asked his share be given to his wife. The bandit died in Jess's arms. After a clever maneuver, Chris managed to shake off their pursuers, allowing the gang to find refuge in a safe location. They reached the rendezvous with Sam, where his nephew immediately complained about Brendan, even though it was his actions that had caused issues. Sam took the gold bars to cut them into pieces, promising the robbers their share later that evening. Brendan doused the car with gasoline and set it alight, sending it and his friend Sterlo off a cliff into a body of water. As planned, Tasha packed her belongings, but instead of Jesse, one of Sam's men came to her. Seeing her suitcase, he took off his belt and struck Tasha across the face with it. She tried to flee, but the man violently threw her around the apartment. He began to strangle her with a wire, but she managed to hit him on the head with an iron. With no way back, Tasha fled and sent a warning SMS to the robbers that Sam had betrayed them. They needed to escape. Their hideout was soon surrounded by special forces. Brendan had a hidden stash of money in a cemetery and planned to retrieve his share by force. Tasha wandered the city until nightfall, when she received a text from Jesse. He had bought her a train ticket and they met there. The trio traveled to Melbourne, where Sam planned to exchange the gold for cash. They located and paid someone who knew where the exchange would take place. National media broadcasted photos of Brendan and Jesse as prime suspects in the recent robbery. Brendan, in a fit of anger, threw a package at Tasha, instructing her to send it to Sterlo's wife. When she refused, he struck her face. Jesse intervened, but the seasoned criminal easily subdued him. Tasha left, and though Jesse wanted to follow, Brendan stopped him. Tasha bought some food and headed back to her apartment, unaware that a hitman hired by Sam was trailing her. She overheard Brendan persuading Jesse to give her some cash and let her go. Seizing the opportunity, Tasha fled once again. This time, Jesse caught up with her while the chaos allowed the hitman easy entry into the apartment. Tasha doubted Brendan would really give Jesse the money, suspecting he only kept Jesse around as a convenient scapegoat. To Jesse, Brendan was the father figure he sorely lacked. Meanwhile, the cunning Brendan told the hitman, Wayne, about the gold, suggesting he could earn much more by joining them than he would get for the kill. After some thought, Jesse decided to return to Brendan. When he did, Brendan pointed a gun at him, then handed it over as a gift. Together, they drove to the location of the planned gold for cash exchange, a job Sam had entrusted to his nephew. Suddenly, Wayne appeared, crashing his car into the gang's vehicle. Mistaking it for an ambush, the gang members opened fire on each other in confusion. Josh was dragged from the car and seated on a chair. He refused to divulge where the gold was hidden, prompting Brendan to pick up a hammer. However, Wayne decided to stuff Josh into a refrigerator, and they followed through with that plan. Josh remained defiant, but the gun pressed to his head finally persuaded him to disclose the location of the suitcases filled with gold. Now needing to flee the country, the gang had one more issue to address. Brendan confronted Sam and shot him dead. Afterward, the robbers stopped at a motel and hid the suitcases under a bed. Jesse asked the concierge to deliver a letter to another room. Together with Brendan, they then went to buy a yacht from a local, planning to escape Australia by sea. Brendan, driven by paranoia, insisted that Jesse stay in his sight at all times, even while he showered. That night, Brendan barely slept. At dawn, they loaded supplies onto the yacht. When Jesse emerged onto the deck, he found Brendan pointing a gun at him again. Brendan offered Jesse a deal for just half a gold bar, which was 1/12 of their loot. However, Jesse told Brendan that he no longer had the gold. Indeed, when he checked the suitcase, he found it filled with worthless scrap metal instead of gold. The phone rang, and Tasha was on the other line. In the letter, Jesse had left her the key to the room. She had been watching them all along and had checked into the same motel. She sneaked into the room and took the gold bars. She told Brendan that if he wanted his share, he would leave Jesse alive and follow their instructions. However, in a sudden rage, Brendan threw Jesse into the water, forgetting that the young man couldn't swim. Without a second thought, he jumped in to save him. Jesse told him he would call and let him know where Brendan could find his half of the money, leaving Brendan no choice but to let him go. On the shore, Tasha was waiting for Jesse. Brendan entered a local laundromat to wait for his clothes to wash. It was then he noticed the unnerving silence. A woman at the entrance recognized him and alerted the police. He walked out with his hands raised, only to be surrounded by special forces and pinned to the ground. Jesse had hidden Brendan's share in a grave, a secret stash known only to the two of them, and sent his former partner a letter with the instructions. But it was unlikely that Brendan would ever be able to use his millions.